The leaders of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States held an extraordinary virtual meeting and condemned the assault on the Mexican embassy in Quito. In Colombia, Brazilian President Lula da Silva arrived in the capital to meet with his counterpart Gustavo Petro and make progress in bilateral cooperation. The Palestinian Israeli occupation army committed 6 massacres against Gazan families, killing 56 people and injuring 89 others. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Through an extraordinary virtual summit, the member countries of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States condemned the siege of the Mexican embassy in the city of Quito, Ecuador, perpetrated by the government of current President Daniel Noboa.
The pro-tempore president of CELAC, Xiomara Castro, on behalf of the member countries of the international organization, urged the government of Ecuador to resume the asylum requested for former Vice President Jorge Glass in Mexico.
The Republic of Ecuador is invited to redirect the due process of the asylum regulations requested by former Vice President Jorge Glass, granting the safeguard required by the United Mexican States, thus initiating the normalization of relations between both states. We reiterate our commitment to consolidate our community of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace.
The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, filed a lawsuit before the International Court of Justice to demand Ecuador's expulsion from the United Nations.
Interpusimos una denuncia en la Corte Internacional de Justicia.
We filed a complaint with the International Court of Justice to request 2 things. First, that Ecuador be expelled from the United Nations. Until it pronounces itself for the non-repetition of this shameful act. That violates international law. That is what we are requesting in the first place, an expulsion of Ecuador from the United Nations. Until there is an apology. And an offer of non-repetition. Never again will there be such an outrage. As the one that has brought us here together.
Una canallada como la que nos tiene aquí reunidos.
Brazil defended the Bolivian government's position of creating a commission to verify that former Vice President Jorge Glass is receiving the necessary medical attention in Ecuador.
I also find interesting the Bolivian proposal to form an integrated commission of the CELAC countries to support the Ecuadorian government to better understand the health situation of former Vice President Glass. That would give U.S. time to advance Indiana the necessary discussions for the safeguarding.
The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, described Ecuador's attack on the Mexican embassy and the kidnapping of former Vice President Jorge Glass as a barbaric act.
Barbarism can penetrate our part of the continent, our space on the planet. What has happened with Ecuador is part of that barbarism, cannot be called otherwise, is the same, comparatively, as what happened with the Iranian embassy or what is happening with Gaza.
In view of the violation of the Vienna Agreement due to the attack on the diplomatic headquarters in the city of Quito, the president of Venezuela ordered the closure of his country's embassy and consulates in Ecuador.
Venezuela has ordered to close our embassy in Ecuador, to close the consulate in Quito, to close immediately the consulate in Guayaquil, and to return the diplomatic personnel to Venezuela immediately. We have a charged affair professor, Pedro Sassoni, and I give him the order to prepare everything.
The actions ordered by the Ecuadorian government are considered criminal and in violation of international law. More than 10 days after the assault on the Mexican embassy, Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa has not pronounced himself on this event.
In Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, thousands of university students protested to demand the restitution of funds for health and education programs. The protest takes place in the midst of a law enacted by the government of Santiago Peña, which supposedly would seek to universalize school meals but compromises funds from other areas. In this framework, progressive and opposition legislators are working with student organizations on a bill to guarantee funds for zero fees in public universities, research scholarships, early childhood, and health programs which were underfunded by the government of Santiago Peña. The president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, arrived in Colombia on Tuesday to meet with his counterpart Gustavo Petro and make progress in bilateral cooperation. The Brazilian president was received by the foreign minister in charge of Colombia, Luis Gilberto Murillo, at the CATAM Air Base in Bogota. Lula da Silva travels accompanied by his foreign minister, Mauro Vieira, and by high-level governmental delegation. On Wednesday, Lula and Petro met to talk about bilateral trade, investments, Amazon cooperation, family agriculture, and measures to fight hunger, among other topics. At present, Brazil is Colombia's third-largest trading partner behind the United States and China, and both governments will seek to continue expanding this trade. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, reported on the advances in the investigation into the assassination attempt against President Nicolas Maduro on March 25th. The Venezuelan prosecutor denounced the various destabilization attempts against the nation in what he considered a part of an ongoing conspiracy. In this regard, Saab pointed out that two individuals carrying weapons ended up arrested in the surroundings of the National Electoral Council, where the president would register his candidacy. The Attorney General detailed that the detainees confessed being members of the political group Vente Venezuela and were paid to execute a plan that sought to promote violent actions, cause commotion in the population, and sabotage the elections.
Always the alibi, as they themselves have revealed with their cowardly spokesman outside of Venezuela. The alibi is to simulate that they are participating in an electoral event, but from there, to promote violent actions, criminal actions, insurrectional actions that threaten the Republican peace, against the rule of law of the country.
In Panama, citizens living in informal settlements marched demanding the government to stop the violent evictions. The demonstrators also requested the Panamanian state to obtain the documents to legalize the lands where some of them have been living for more than 2 decades. At the same time, they denounced the precarious conditions in which they live and reiterated their demand to have access to decent housing. According to statistics from the Ministry of Housing and Territorial Planning, there are around 414 informal settlements in the country where approximately 63,715 families live.
Well, when there is an eviction, the whole community burns the house. They pass over the backhoe without caring if there is a living being inside. They don't care about anything practically when the eviction takes place.
Palestinian authorities denounced on Wednesday that in the last 24 hours, the Israeli occupation army committed 6 massacres against Gazan families, in which 56 people were killed and 89 were wounded. In this way, they indicated that within the bombardments of the Tel Aviv regime against a house in the center of Rafah, 7 people were killed, among them 4 children. On the other hand, the Wafa agency reported that also 6 Palestinians were killed and several were wounded as a result of an attack on a gathering of citizens in the Sheikh Radwan market, north of Gaza City. On the 194th day of Israel's genocide in the Palestinian enclave, the death toll stands at 33,843 and the number of wounded exceeds 76,000, while thousands of corpses lie under the rubble. Palestinian citizens on Wednesday reiterated that an Israeli army invasion of the Rafah area would be catastrophic, as 1.4 million displaced people are crowded into the southern Gaza Strip city. In this way, thousands of Palestinians in Rafah wonder where they would go if Israel were to carry out a ground invasion of the city. For months, families have been living in unhealthy situations, cramped into the tent camps, schools turned into shelters, and relatives' homes. Meanwhile, Israeli media reports that in the last 12 hours, the army has increased level of preparedness for an eventual incursion in that town and in the refugee camps located in the center of the Strip. Several governments of the world and UN agencies have criticized on several occasions an eventual military offensive against that city.
It will be a big problem if there is a land incursion in Rafah. You can see thousands of people, more than 1.5 million people in Rafah. Where can they go? We can barely find space for each other. Each tent holds 6, 4, or 3 families instead of 1. The least you can find is 2 families inside a tent. What will happen when they enter Rafah? Where can we go?
On Wednesday, the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, accused Western nations of applying double standards for rejecting Iran's response to Israel, but not condemning Tel Aviv for the attack carried out against the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
The attack by Israel against the Iranian mission in Damascus, in violation of international law and the Vienna Convention, was the last straw. Apart from a few countries, no one reacted to Israel's aggressive attitude that trampled on international practices. Those who remained silent in the face of Israel's aggressive attitude immediately rushed to condemn Iran's response.
The Turkish president also blamed the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the main responsible for tensions in the Middle East.
The main responsible for the tension is Netanyahu and his bloody administration. We believe that any statement that does not acknowledge this truth will not be helpful to efforts to reduce tension.
On Wednesday, Israel's government assured that its nation will make its own decisions in retaliation against Iran. In this way, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu assured that he would not necessarily follow the calls of Western allies in making a decision concerning Iran.
I am now coming from meetings with the foreign ministers of Great Britain and Germany. Last night I spoke to British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and soon I will also speak to other leaders. I thank our friends for their support in defending Israel, and I say this for both the verbal support and support in actions. They also have all kinds of proposals and advice. I appreciate it, but I want to be clear. We will make our decisions on our own, and the state of Israel will do what it needs to defend itself.
We have a fun short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Georgia, police repressed thousands of people demonstrating in Tbilisi against a controversial bill on foreign agents. Riot police in the capital of Georgia began clearing protesters from an entrance to the parliament building as they moved to break up a demonstration against a bill aimed at designating certain groups as foreign agents. The police force mobilized water cannons to the scene and sprayed an unknown liquid at protesters. In addition, at least 14 people were arrested. The law in question would oblige media outlets and non-profit organizations to register as foreign if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. The text of the bill is the same as one presented in 2023, but the term agent of foreign influence is replaced by organization promoting the interests of a foreign power. On Wednesday, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk visited the internally displaced persons camps in northeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. During his 3-day visit, Volker is scheduled to hold a series of meetings with human rights defenders and civil society organizations, as well as with President Felix Tshisekedi and members of the government. In this week, the UN and its partners launched a regional refugee response plan on February 22nd to provide critical protection and assistance to Congolese refugees in neighboring countries. The UN's plan aimed to support nearly 1 million refugees and 1 million members of host communities.
Just met with a group of people who had been displaced as a result of horrible violence. Massacres were committed in their homes, and they have been here for the last 4 years. Their most fervent wish is to be able to go back.
Unusually heavy rainfall in Dubai caused flooding on modern highways and chaos at the airport on Wednesday after the storm brought record rainfall. The storm caused since Monday night more than 250 millimeters of rainfall, equivalent to what the United Arab Emirates normally receives in 2 years. Official media reported that the rain set a record since 1949, before the formation of the Emirates in 1971. The situation generated a monumental traffic jam on highways and chaos at the airport, which records the highest traffic in the world. The authorities recommended passengers not to move there except in a case of extreme necessity, as flights continue with delays and others are diverted. The storm hit the Emirates and Bahrain after passing through Oman, where it left 18 people dead. Let's now go to the world of sports. On Wednesday, it was announced on the African continent that Senegal will host for the first time the 2026 Youth Olympic Games to be held in the city of Dakar. In this sense, from October 31st to November 13, 2026, Senegal will host the best young athletes of the planet who will compete in 35 disciplines during 14 days in an Olympic event never before held in Africa. These games have been in the planning stages since the 2022 Dakar on Youth Festival, which mixes competitions and cultural actions as a way to increase youth participation in sport, but they were postponed to 2026. For his part, the president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, expressed his support to the Senegalese people and the African continent for hosting this event. And moving on to European football, because the second legs of the Champions League were played on Tuesday, with PSG and Borussia Dortmund both winning their second legs to advance to the semi-finals.
Despite scoring the first goal of the home match, a red card in the first 30 minutes of the game left the Spanish league team a man down. This was enough for the offense of the French league team to come back and dominate the game thanks to 2 late goals to secure their place in the semi-finals with a final score of 4-1. On the other hand, Borussia Dortmund beat Atletico of Madrid with score of 4-2 at the Signal Iduna Park in German territory to materialize their place in the semi-final and eliminate as underdog the team from Madrid that was looking for its 4th semi-final under the current Argentinian manager. In this way, the semi-final crossing is set between the representatives of the German and French league, the Paris Saint-Germain against the Borussia Dortmund.
And the ball does not stop rolling. The UEFA Champions League quarterfinals resume on Wednesday, and if they are anything like last week's first legs, a couple of exciting games are to be expected. 2 deadlock ties will end with 2 European giants advancing to the semi-finals and 2 being sent home. Manchester City's match against Real Madrid headlines the day's action after a 3-3 draw last week, while Arsenal traveled to Bayern Munich following a 2-2 draw in the first leg. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.